Good morning, Dog Nation. I'm Brandon Adams, and this is DawgNation Daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented today by Kroger. And we've reached the day before the big day. Georgia getting ready to take on Texas tomorrow. And on our program today, we are going to get you ready for it. We'll look back on what was an amazing night for us last night with DawgNation On Tap. Oh my gosh, how much fun was that? Hundreds of you in the building with us there at Terrapin Brewery. We will relive some of the moments from that and really celebrate what was just, I think, a great night for DawgNation. And an awesome preview for the game against Texas on Saturday. We'll also explain why the narrative around Georgia and the skepticism and the doubt here ahead of this game on Saturday, maybe that's starting to evolve a bit. We'll tell you what's new on that front today. We will also remind you about why you should not forget everything that's been said about Texas in comparison to Georgia over the course of these last months. That, we believe, ought to be fuel for you as Georgia gets ready to play this one on Saturday. Jeff Sentell stops by. We'll talk some UGA recruiting with him. We'll give you a couple of thoughts on the other games of the weekend. But let's face it, let's be honest. There is one main event contest in all of college football. It's one of the biggest ever played at Sanford Stadium. It is, in many ways, Act 3 of a trilogy between Georgia and Texas. And the good news is the Dogs have won the two of the previous ones and looking to get that third one on Saturday too. So let's get ready to settle in and talk about how it all goes down. There are very few football weekends that feel bigger than this one does. We want to be at our best, and here on a Friday, that is exactly what we're going to try to do. We're glad to have you with us for it. It is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented today by Kroger, and it begins right now.
We talked about intent. What was our intent when we walked on the field? Our intent was not to take pictures, not to do all the superstar stuff. Our intent, our intent was to eat. Our intent was to come eat. Tried to rob us with calls in this place. And these guys are so resilient. These players did the best out of me, and I'm so proud of these guys. Because nobody believed, nobody gave us a chance. Your whole network doubted us. Nobody believed us.
Welcome to the 2024 SEC Football Championship.
This team never, ever says no. Never die attitude, man. They were so fired up at halftime. The offense was in there pumped up. Gunner was coming out. Them guys were fired up, ready to go, man.
For the MVP of the 2024 SEC Championship game, it is Dalen Everett.
Yeah, this team didn't beat Texas. Texas hasn't played this team of ours. So 2 completely different teams, in my opinion.
They're a very tough team to play at home. They're 51-2 in their last 53 games at home.
Yeah, I mean, it's huge. It's going to be super fun. I know the city's going to be rocking. Our fans are going to show up. We're going to show up. And we know what kind of game it's going to be. It's going to be like the last 2. I mean, it's going to be a physical game.
Today's episode of DawgNation Daily is brought to you by Kroger, fresh for everyone.
Presented by DawgNation.com. This is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. Here's your host, Brandon Adams.
Man, oh man, my favorite tradition that we've started this year around DawgNation is the hype video on Fridays leading into DawgNation Daily, presented by Kroger. Our Cody Chaffins puts it together. We ain't had a better one than that one. And a game like this, the epic showdown, Act 3 of a trilogy, is the way that I think of it. You better believe, you better tell the story well of what Game 1 and Game 2 look like, both those taking place in 2024, Georgia winning them both. That is absolutely amazing. What a great start, and what a great way to set the stage for what's going to happen tomorrow in Athens with Georgia and Texas getting ready to do this for a 3rd time since Texas is joining the SEC. Now, coming up in a couple of minutes, we're going to do a couple of things. Thing number 1 is we're going to remind you of the fact that you should not forget all of the stuff that's been said about Texas and all the stuff that's been said about Texas at the expense of Georgia over the course of the offseason. We have long memories around here. We keep receipts around here. And if you want to be in the exact right fever pitch for why this game is so important for Georgia tomorrow, maintaining its status in the SEC atop Texas, we'll give you a good reminder of that here in a little bit too. And I got to tell you this, also coming up in a couple of minutes, we are going to look back on what was an amazing night last night. I mean, I was just blown away. We had 300, hundreds of people there last night for our DawgNation On Tap event. This was one of the special things we've done, I think, in the history of DawgNation. We're going to celebrate some of the best moments of that with you coming up in a moment, too. But prior to that, let's get serious. Let's talk about what's happening for Georgia leading into this game. Now, we have said a lot this week that my personal feeling about Georgia has evolved. I have gone from, over the course of the season, I'm not quite so sure. Is this a championship-level team? Can this team be as good as we all hope and want Georgia to be in every season? And as the games progress and as Georgia keeps finding a way to win, oftentimes in dramatic fashion, slowly but surely, I find myself having a little more confidence in UGA, feeling like, you know what, maybe this team is showing some special characteristics about itself, even though there are some blemishes and imperfections that don't remind you necessarily of the 2021 and 2022 national championship team. Maybe this is a completely Georgia team doing a completely different way, but they are showing a level of resiliency and resolve that defines this as a truly special team that maybe is getting better at the right moments. And what's cool is, and obviously tomorrow goes a long way towards this, and we don't expect it to be easy against Texas. We think that Texas has got just as much to play for as Georgia does. They're just as hard to beat as we hope that Georgia is. So there's plenty of respect here for what we think that Tech's going to be able to do tomorrow. But it is interesting to watch the evolution that seems to be occurring with Georgia, a team that really hasn't been talked about very much on the national front over the course of this season. They've been ranked high. They've had a pretty record, but compared to teams such as Ohio State, last year's national champion, or maybe other teams, Georgia has just not generated as much chatter. But maybe today, ahead of the game tomorrow, where Georgia can really prove, I think once and for all, maybe just how good it is moving towards the postseason, maybe we're seeing some evidence that that narrative around Georgia is changing. Let me give an example from a guy that you may call a Georgia critic, if you know who he is. You may think of him as a skeptic of Georgia and the SEC. He is Joel Klatt. He works for Fox Sports. He also does his own podcast. But this week, I think Klatt from an objective perspective, outside the bubble of DawgNation, I think he gave voice to something. Speaking of voice, you heard mine just crack right there. It's going to be an interesting weekend for my voice, for those of you who know my struggles here this year. But the point is, I think Klatt gave voice to something from outside the bubble of DawgNation that Georgia fans themselves seem to be noticing. That, hey, all of a sudden, maybe Georgia's a lot more capable of making noise heading towards the postseason than maybe we thought they were in the month of September, heading back into October, where we were not quite so sure. I think that Joel Klatt, on his own podcast this week, had a very interesting way of saying that. Let me give you a chance to hear this.
Georgia finally took care of business. We've been waiting for them to kind of go out there and maul somebody. They did that. They ran for 300 yards and beating Mississippi State. That was solid to see after we had seen them just play around and constantly be in a deficit in these SEC games. And now finally they went out there and just boom. Now, granted, I know it was an early deficit, but after that, it was over. Georgia started playing well, and nobody in the country wants to see Georgia all of a sudden establish a rhythm as we get close to the college football playoff. They might not even go to the SEC championship game, and you're sitting there and you're like, I don't want to play that team. Guess who that reminds me of? Ohio State last year. I know they didn't take momentum into the playoff, but no one wanted to see them in the playoff. And Georgia's starting to resemble that for me a little bit.
So I think that's very interesting from Joel Klatt on a couple of fronts. First of all, the fact that he makes the comparison to say this year's Georgia looks like last year's national champion. To be said a different way, this is a Georgia team that's starting to take on the look of a potential national champion, as described there by Joel Klatt. And once again, it is not my intention here today, although I do have some growing confidence in Georgia. I expect Georgia to play well tomorrow, and I do expect Georgia to win. This is not trash talk for me. This is not, as a pro-Georgia guy, Georgia's about to just run through Texas and dominate them and blah, blah, blah. They might. I hope they do. But it's not my intention to say, this is going to be easy. It's just interesting to note that people are starting to take notice of Georgia. And the one thing I believe that Georgia fans would like to be true, Klatt describes that maybe it is true. He says, suddenly nobody really wants to look at their playoff bracket and see Georgia as a looming opponent. Nobody likes the idea. Nobody relishes the chance to play Georgia. When this team was very vulnerable on defense, or when they weren't quite scoring as many points, when people weren't quite so sure yet about Gunnar Stockton and what Stockton had around him, I don't know. In fact, we heard plenty of people say this, no one's afraid of Georgia anymore. Well, it sounds like Joel Klatt says there's some people around college football that are starting to be afraid of Georgia again. And the point of all of this is the Texas game tomorrow is a chance for Georgia to validate that that really is true. We've said that a Georgia win, I think, clinches a playoff spot. I think it gives Georgia a chance to stay alive for one of the top 4 seeds. I think it does demonstrate as you move deeper into November that Georgia really could win the national championship. That, as Klatt says, that this year's Georgia reminds him of last year's national champion. And speaking of that for a moment, isn't it interesting who Ohio State, who did beat Texas earlier this season, and has mostly been coasting against a collection of somewhat lesser opponents since then, isn't it interesting that as Georgia is getting this newfound respect and being considered in a way that's different than it's been considered earlier this season, there's also a little bit of a change in the way that Ohio State's been talked about too. Dan Orlovsky's an ESPN analyst. He was on ESPN television the other day. And listen to the way in which a team like Ohio State is the conversation around it is starting to evolve. Suddenly Ohio State isn't the most dominant team in college football. Suddenly Ohio State's a team that, are we sure they can pass the test? We haven't seen them tested against a tough opponent. Are we sure they can pass that test? This is very interesting. Georgia, newfound respect. Ohio State, the team that's been ranked number 1, is there a new level of skepticism around it? This is the respected analyst Dan Orlovsky on ESPN television here this week.
The least tested number 1 team in the history of college football, they've played nobody. I mean, week 1, Texas. Ever since then, they haven't played anybody. I don't know if they played a team that's ranked right now since Texas. Everyone they have been trailing for 1 second in the second half this year. We have no idea who this Ohio State team, very good team, quarterback's a really good player. Jeremiah Smith's best player in college football. We have no idea who Ohio State is, like down 4 in the fourth quarter.
So we've been doing this thing the last few days about what would you rather be, game control team or battle-tested team that emerges via a tough schedule? And it seems like the committee favors the the game control, the pretty records, the large margins of victory. And in 2021 and 2022, that was certainly a path for Georgia towards a national championship. But boy, it seems like the fans, the TV viewers, are gravitating towards these amazingly competitive, unbelievably entertaining SEC games. And it's in games like that that Georgia has emerged. And all of a sudden now, guys like Dan Orlovsky, even though he doesn't mention Georgia by name, and Joel Klatt are suddenly starting to say, boy, these teams that have been through it, these teams have had to fight back from deficits, these teams that have had to prove what they're all about, maybe it's from that collection of teams, including Georgia, that the national champion might come from. And as a Georgia fan, you certainly hope that's true, because while Georgia hasn't always made it look easy this season, to be honest, and there have been plenty of games in which maybe during those games I thought that Georgia might lose and might end its pursuit of a championship. We all would acknowledge that's been the case for Georgia. Somehow Georgia keeps finding a way. And I do think that's a testament to what Georgia is, not a criticism of what they're not, because they didn't blow whoever they're playing out. When you're playing this kind of schedule and this kind of SEC, you may not get lots of blowouts. But when you win these tough games, when you come back, when you make the fourth quarter your best quarter, and you save your best for last, and you, through adversity, find a way to pull out a win, maybe you are proving that you really are a championship team, and maybe Georgia can take that into the game against Texas tomorrow too. As a reminder of what Kirby Smart has said, now that the national media seems to be evolving on this somewhat, I thought Kirby, when Georgia put up 17 points in the fourth quarter and outscored Ole Miss 17-0 in that final stanza a couple of weeks ago, I thought he said it well. It's what defines Georgia, and maybe now the media is starting to come around on this a bit. Let's hear Kirby as a reminder on that.
I just told the guys that's a culture win, because you don't win that game if you're not physically tough, mentally tough. We call it hard to kill. And the one thing we're hard to kill.
So that is what Georgia takes into Texas tomorrow. Hard to kill. Will Texas get some shots in? Probably so. They've played better lately. I do have respect for Texas. I really do. I get annoyed by the media narrative around it, but I have respect for that program. They're going to get their shots tomorrow. They may even take a lead. If you're a Georgia fan, you're like, been there, done that. We've seen that a million times. That could happen again tomorrow too. But there is no lead that Texas will feel safe with. There is no moment in which they're like, okay, well, Georgia's not coming back from this, because Georgia has come back and come back and come back all season long. And maybe tomorrow they don't have to do that. Maybe this is a team that can, much like it did against Mississippi State, for the most part, play for all four quarters. And as Joel Klatt says, maybe this is a team ready to demonstrate to the entire country what Klatt says he's noticed. This is no longer a team you relish the chance of playing. Now you're afraid of Georgia, similar to the way in which you would have been afraid of them in the past. That's what they can prove against Texas tomorrow, and that's why DawgNation is at such a fever pitch for this football game that's about to take place. All right, let me shift to this. Speaking of fever pitch and being excited about that, y'all, let me just take a moment to say to the hundreds of you, and I do mean hundreds, I could not believe how packed out Terrapin Brewery in Athens was last night for our DawgNation On Tap event. This was truly one of the special things that we've had here at DawgNation. We had an incredible team of people that help us put this together. Some of the folks you know from DawgNation. In other cases, folks that have just been helping us out this year, but what an incredible job to make this, I thought, really a first-class event. The Sorchero's food was delicious. The Terrapin beer, of course, was great. The Georgia fans were on their game. Man, this was an incredible experience. I thought that Mike and Kaylee and Cody and Connor, I thought they were all wonderful. And we also had an incredible collection of former Georgia players on hand, too. And, boy, the crowd was just eating this up. With our guy, John Stinchcomb, the former All-American. Davin Bellamy was there. Rodrigo Blankenship was there. How about the guy there that's got the Georgia G shaved in the back of his head? That's amazing. I'm just telling you, this was as good as it gets from Georgia fans yesterday and from everybody. It'll be a night I'll never forget. And hopefully it was the perfect lead into what's going to be an awesome weekend for Georgia. Getting that win against Texas on Saturday, that's what we're certainly hopeful that the story is going to be, and can't wait to see it play out. And in fact, for those of you that couldn't be there, and for those of you who were there, thank you so much for your attendance. Thank you so much for making this really a great night all around. I want to give you a little taste of something here. A great question came Rodrigo Blankenship's way about one of his fabulous moments in his Georgia career, the game-winning kick to beat Notre Dame. He gets surprised with the scholarship. And then Davin Bellamy, who was one of Rodrigo's teammates at the time, jumps in to tell a little of his own personal anecdotes about Rodrigo. This is what it was like to be a fly on the wall last night for this, and just hear the interaction that former Georgia players were having with the Georgia fans. This was really awesome. Rodrigo Blankenship, Davin Bellamy, and a lot of fun last night.
Rodrigo, I did want to ask you, that video of you getting your scholarship in the locker room, did you know that was coming? Was that staged, or was that a total surprise to you?
That's a great question.
So I had been a walk-on in 2016, walked on over the summer as well, and then going into that 2017 season, we had brought in another kicker, a grad transfer from Wofford on scholarship, and that really rubbed me the wrong way, but I wasn't going to let it stop me. I was determined to be the starting kicker for the University of Georgia. I ultimately ended up winning the job, and then on Thursday, before we left to go up to Notre Dame, I got a text from Coach Fountain, one of our special teams coaches. He said, "Hey, Coach Smart wants to see you in his office before meetings." And at first, I was like, "Oh, what did I do? Like, did I get a ticket? Did I like?" I'm a rule follower, right? So I was concerned. I thought I broke a rule or something. So it's like, man, I'm getting called into the principal's office. And so I go into his office, and he says, "Rod, I'm going to put you on scholarship." And he said, "But don't tell anybody yet, because I've got something planned to tell the team." He's like, "You can tell your parents, your girlfriend if you want, but don't tell anyone else, because I have something planned for you." And so I said, "Okay, I won't tell anybody else." I didn't know what he had planned. And then sure enough, he gave me that opportunity after we won the Notre Dame game to tell the team, and that was an incredible moment.
Yo, you know what? You know what, though? Rodrigo probably doesn't remember this because he was such a young pup. We were walking into the locker room, and me and Rodrigo had kind of the same schedule. So we got to practice around the same time. And we're walking in, and Rodrigo started telling me about all the angles and the way the wind is blowing and an obtuse triangle, and how he was sitting in class and figured out that if a triangle is 90 degrees, that means the field goal should be this. And I remember saying to myself, this guy got so much attention to detail to his craft. I don't know if he's going to be good, but now that we sit here and we're calling him the Hall of Fame Rod, that moment just sticks out to me.
That's an awesome story. I mean, can you believe that? How much fun was that to hear Rodrigo telling his story, Davin Bellamy sharing his anecdotes with that. John Stinchcomb was amazing and awesome last night. I'm just telling you, I'm going to remember DawgNation On Tap for a very long time. I thought the entire team of folks here with us that helped to put this together were truly amazing. Obviously, Terrapin Brewery was an incredible host for the night last night, and all the Georgia fans who came in there made it truly special. We live for these kinds of weekends. Big games, huge level of hype, huge level of excitement, and in your own way, you're celebrating and you're enjoying all of that. Now, we just need one more thing to happen. We just need Georgia to win this football game. And can you imagine how great that's going to be to get a third win against Texas in Austin, in Atlanta, and now in Athens? Since this team has been in the SEC, and Georgia can remind them that the SEC still runs through the University of Georgia, no matter what anybody else says about that. Saturday night is going to be a big one between the hedges. My name's Brandon Adams, and this is DawgNation Daily, daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented today by Kroger. My, oh my, what a day we're going to have in Athens tomorrow. We're doing our part to get ready for it with you here right now, and we're happy to have you. Plenty more on the game here coming up in just a moment for those of you watching on video across all platforms, including YouTube and DawgNation.com, Facebook, on demand, live, whatever you're doing. Radio Athens, Sports Radio 960 F podcast, wherever you find them, including the world-famous DawgNation.com, Apple, Spotify, everything else. Just thrilled to have you. And a big thanks to our friends at Kroger who make it all possible, too. Now, for us, it's almost like there's nothing that can even be envisioned beyond what's going to happen tomorrow night. But don't forget, on the other side of Georgia, Texas, we got a big holiday season along the way. And that means we're just a couple of weeks away from Thanksgiving, which means it's really time for you to make the plans for Thanksgiving. And what I love about Kroger is the work they're doing to make this year's Thanksgiving as convenient as it can possibly be. They're doing some awesome stuff with that. So when you got the turkey or the sides or all the stuff that you want to make a great meal for you and the family and those that you love, your local Kroger store is going to be able to help you out with all of this. So you can just go in store and look around and figure out what you need, but you can also start your shopping experience online if you want to too. That's Kroger.com/Thanksgiving. Kroger.com/Thanksgiving. I'll tell you right now, Thanksgiving is one of my favorite days on the calendar. My family's always loved it. I know yours probably does too. And I love the way in which when you go into Kroger leading into a Thanksgiving, it's just such a wholesome experience to watch everybody shopping and throwing food in the cart and getting everything together, the desserts and the sides and the turkey and everything else. I love this time of year, and I am looking forward to enjoying my Thanksgiving with my family here coming up too. And of course, we appreciate Kroger and everything it does to help us get ready for it. So check out Kroger.com/Thanksgiving for more on that today. Kroger.com/Thanksgiving for more on that today. Okay, we got Jeff Sentell coming up. A big football game means a gigantic list of recruits on hand tomorrow. Jeff will give us more information on that. I'll also see tonight on Atlanta News First for the start of the GHSA State High School Football Playoffs. We got a big one with some Georgia prospects, certainly a Georgia commit there in that one. So we'll tell you more about that with Jeff Sentell coming up tonight on Atlanta News First. A lot of recruiting talk and some Georgia-Texas talk here coming up in just a moment. Can't wait for that. But prior to that, let's go around the doghouse. And it's presented today by our friends at Zagoria Law. Now, there is an element of Georgia and Texas that we can describe as a big game, and obviously there are big stakes for Georgia, but there's also an emotional element of this game too that I don't think can necessarily be overlooked, in that Texas is a big macro brand. In many respects, we believe they probably have more money to spend than Georgia. They're going to come into the SEC. They're going to try to throw their weight around. And man, oh man, you go back to a year ago, it seemed like there were a lot of folks that, for whatever reason, and maybe this is just our perception and maybe our perception's faulty, but for whatever reason, it seemed like, boy, the wheels were being greased, whether it was an advantageous schedule or whatever else, that, Texas, which clearly has the potential of making a lot more money for the SEC, their welcome to the SEC was a pretty cozy one. Seemed like a lot of folks were really happy to have Texas in the SEC. And a lot of people seem to want to put Texas at the top of the SEC before they had a chance to earn it. Then Georgia goes out and beats them twice last season, in Austin, in Atlanta. Perhaps I've mentioned something to you about that a time or two. I think I probably have. And yet even after that, this offseason, it seemed like that was just very quickly memory hold, almost forgotten. No one seemed to remember that Georgia was the reigning SEC champs. And yes, Texas may have advanced to the college football playoff semifinals, but they did so without having to play Georgia again because Georgia had already beaten them twice. And we think those head-to-head wins for Georgia ought to have mattered. And yet this offseason, that wasn't the case at all. We talked yesterday about Paul Feinbaum and his belief that, oh my gosh, Arch Manning's the greatest quarterback of all time, and he's going to be the best quarterback in college football since Tim Tebow, and Gunnar Stockton's basically an embarrassment. Gunnar Stockton, I think what Feinbaum said, going to be selling insurance or something like that, which is so disrespectful, and one apology alone, we don't think erases all of that. But Feinbaum this week here with DawgNation did at least try to own up to that a bit. But Paul wasn't the only one who did that. There was the very strange story in The Athletic that frankly had a lot of very strange stories this offseason, and over the course of the season too, for what it's worth, about how Texas is the new Alabama on the basis of having won nothing and not beating Georgia at all. It was this attempt to crown Texas once again with very little in the way of actual tangible accomplishments, but the last name Manning means so much, and Texas got so much money and so many fans and so much whatever else, that surely they must be on their way to taking over the SEC, and surely Georgia must be on its way to being an afterthought with all of that. There was even a guy, we like him, Peter Burns, on the radio with Chris Doering. Even though Doering's a Gator, we kind of like Doering too. Back in the summer, they were doing all of this sort of thing too, almost acting like Georgia's SEC championship from 2024, like it didn't happen. Like, it wasn't a thing. In fact, to give you a reminder of something we talked about a lot when it happened from much earlier in the summer, Doring and Peter Burns, two SEC guys on the radio together, just heaping praise on Texas and assuming that whatever had made Georgia Georgia in the past was suddenly about to slip away from this program here. This is the context, in other words, for what's going to happen tomorrow. This is Chris Doring and Peter Burns from the offseason.
We are seeing things that we haven't seen from Georgia before, right? We're seeing the inability to retain the roster. They were like one of the last schools to be able to keep their team in place and have the kind of depth that you have to be able to win championships the way that Alabama did, the way that Georgia did. That they were hurt last year up the middle of their defense with injuries and not having that next wave of player to be able to step in. We're seeing things from Georgia before where they go and they get manhandled by Ole Miss the way that they did. We're seeing things from them get physically beaten the way that they did by Notre Dame in the Sugar Bowl. These are things that are signs of concern, and knowing what the landscape of college football is now, we don't necessarily know if it can sustain in this type of
that style of college football, or that roster management or stacking of talent is no longer available because of NIL and the transfer portal. So yeah, I mean, I get it. And again, it's not necessarily a demise. It's just I don't know how you can continue to build upon that. And then the question kind of stems for, all right, if Georgia's a team that has struggled, is it Texas that's now the superpower of the SEC, going back to back in their college football playoff runs? Now, in fact, that they're looking at spending $35 to $40 million on this roster. If you're going to look at the numbers, the SEC does not run through Georgia right now. The SEC powerhouse are the Texas Longhorns.
I'm sorry. That still aggravates me to no end. I don't like Peter Burns. I think Peter Burns is a hardcore SEC guy. I think he does a good job. We're fans of Peter Burns. We like Chris Doring too. But the notion that the SEC runs through Texas, even though Georgia ran through Texas twice a year ago on the way to the SEC championship, that's just ludicrous. And it's one of the reasons why Georgia fans have a little extra something for this opponent in this game. And for what it's worth, Peter, when we had him on the show a few weeks after he said that, like I said, I like Peter Burns, but I had to call him out for what I did not think was a very wise statement. And Burns on our show, from SEC Media Days, offered his defense for why he had said what he said.
Now, of course, we did have to give you a little grief early in the summer because of on the radio show. What was the line that the SEC
so kind of an idiot. I don't remember. I got a short. I'm like a cornerback. Right? You get burned once, you don't forget about it.
Well, if you're like me, you also say so much over the course of a summer. By the time we get to the end of the summer, who knows what said what? But it is interesting because.
But what I said real quick, it was about that I thought that the road through the SEC went through Texas, and a lot of that had to do with because of what I've seen Sark offensively have built there, and it felt really more of the quarterback situation. Now, I've seen a little bit of Gunner. Kirby's seen a whole lot more than I have. But at the same point, I felt like there was going to be more offensive success over at Texas than I thought that there was going to be with Georgia.
So there you go. You hear it straight out. It's Gunner Stockton for Georgia. It's Arch Manning for Texas. Well, guess what? How's that worked out thus far this season? In other words, Georgia fans, I think, are well within their right to have long memories about all this stuff, about what Peter said, about what Feinbaum said, about what The Athletic has written, or anybody else. And tomorrow's a day to go out and prove just how wrong they are. Now, you still got to prove it, and this is a Texas team that wants to prove something in its own right, too. We're not here to tell you that it's going to be easy, but we're here to tell you that Georgia has got a lot to play for, including proving its critics wrong, which is oftentimes where we see Georgia at its best. And that is Around the Doghouse, presented today by our friends at Zagoria Law. Now, tomorrow, we think the big dog is going to eat, and we think they're going to take a bite out of those Texas Longhorns, and that's a good thing. But what's not a good thing is some sort of dog in your neighborhood, your park, your local city streets, whatever else. We see stories in the news all the time about negligent owners. Animal gets loose, knocks somebody over. You can break an arm that way. Dog bite, that can be a very serious situation, in some cases even lethal. These are not joking matters. These are very serious situations. And if you or someone you love has been harmed by the negligent care of someone not just taking proper care of their dog, Well, we think that you ought to be able to fight for compensation just like any other personal injury situation. That's really what Zagoria Law is all about. They literally wrote the book on how to win these types of cases. They are standing by ready to serve you if this is your story, or if someone you love has been hurt in the same way. Pain and suffering, medical bills, things like that. All of this adds up. And if somebody didn't take proper care of their dog and it has resulted in an injury situation for you, well, let Zagoria fight to get you what you deserve. 833-GA-DOG-BITE's the phone number. Dog spelled conventionally, D-O-G. 833-GA-DOG-BITE. Or online, ZagoriaLaw.com. Z-A-G-O-R-I-A, ZagoriaLaw.com for more on that today. Okay, before we're done, we'll give you a couple final thoughts on some of the other big games of the weekend. Obviously, for us, though, there ain't but one that really matters, and that's Georgia hosting Texas tomorrow, one of the biggest we've ever seen in Sanford Stadium. Of course, that also means big recruits on hand, too. So the recruiting ramifications of Georgia versus Texas. Let's talk about that right now with Jeff Sentell here today on DawgNation Daily, presented by Kroger.
From Athens and across the SEC or wherever the recruiting trail may lead, here's a DawgNation.com insider.
Jeff Sentell, before we jump into it here, and Jeff's already on the road. I mean, he's getting ready to go. He's fired up. He's on his way to Athens right now, perhaps. But before we get into all of that, let's also go back and look at last night, too. I thought, and we've been lucky enough over the course of our 10 years of doing DawgNation and for me, DawgNation Daily, some amazing events, but I don't know that anything tops what happened last night for DawgNation On Tap. Hundreds of folks there. You, the rest of our DawgNation teammates were amazing. Terrapin Beer was great. Guys like Rodrigo Blankenship and John Stinchcomb and Davin Bellamy, they were amazing too. This was really an unforgettable night. So first of all, thank you, Jeff, for everything you did to make it a great experience. But how about your own memories of it? How much did you enjoy it?
Brandon, good morning, sir. Man, I tell you, first of all, it makes me think about, you remember, I believe it was 2018 LSU when we were at an establishment where we were having a pop-up meeting. And this was, I think the kick was around 3:30 because it was the CBS game. But we had an event and there were DawgNation folks kind of lined up at the door like a couple hours or an hour before that opened. And, you know, that was just one of those things where you thought about a very high water mark. And there were moments last night, Brandon, I don't know how you felt, but it was like, having Rodrigo there telling stories and Davin telling stories and John Stitchcomb, the classy professional he always is when it comes to talking about football and his career and his time in Athens, and with just the right amount of red and black sentiment as well. I mean, you had to be there to listen to Davin fully articulate how he stretched 7150 a week during his time at Georgia in a very clever fashion.
And by the way, that's $71.50. Let's make sure people are aware. That's $71.50.
Yeah, that's correct. I mean, that was back in the OG days before anything like that. And now, you know, remember those days when you would get suspended for selling your own jersey or selling your autograph? And now where we've arrived at now is kind of funny. Brandon, I thought it was really cool. I especially like the people from Maryland, the people from Oregon, the people that, you know, definitely crossed the miles in order to kind of be there today. And they shared their stories. I mean, some people brought us like really awesome, like handmade crafts and bracelets and everything else like that. And it really is. I don't know about you, man. I think it is definitely a recharge for all the work we do and the gratitude we always try to show about we get to do this and we get to cover this great football program for our vacation.
Yeah, no, I think that's an awesome thing, and obviously leads into Saturday, what's going to be a huge game for Georgia and Texas. Also really big on the recruiting front too. So let's just jump right into it. Give me an idea what that visitors list is looking like for Georgia against Texas tomorrow.
Yeah, Brandon, let me see if hopefully have a camera on you as we can rattle this off. Because I want to see your best Kirby GIF impersonation. Brandon, how about the number one senior quarterback in the country? How's that sound?
That sounds good.
What about the number one junior quarterback in the country? How does that sound?
I like that too.
What if I could even raise the stakes? And how about the number one sophomore quarterback in the country as well?
How about that?
All three of those prospects are going to be at Athens.
Wow. Listen.
Now take it a little further, Brandon. I think two of them are going to be dogs. I think one of them are already a dog, and one of them is very likely trending to be a dog before the weekend's over. So that's obviously the 5-star Jaden Wade. Like, there's a lot of innuendo. There's a lot of buzz circling around Jaden about perhaps that he's not going to be a 2028 cycle member for long. He might class up. He's already an older sophomore, Brandon. I saw him in person, and people laugh when I say this, but this is what I think about. Like, the thought of having one more year of Gunner and then Jared Curtis next year. You got Ryan Puglisi, you got Ryan Montgomery. Everybody knows how great Puglisi is, but Brandon Montgomery is really coming on so far during his first fall on campus. On the practice field, he's making it hum. He's looking sharp. And then you potentially add a Jaden Wade into the mix for the 2027 season, and you're like, oh gosh, Georgia doesn't have the most efficient track record of getting 5-star quarterbacks on the field. But I mean, Brennan, it seems like, they'll do those ESPN rankings where they do the quarterback futures for the quarterback rooms across the country. I can't imagine, maybe some Joe Moore Award voters might chime in, or some of those folks that think Texas is the epicenter of the SEC. I can't imagine a Georgia quarterback room that would potentially have a Curtis, Jaden Wade, maybe a Ryan Montgomery, maybe a Puglisi all in the mix. That's got to be the strongest quarterback room I've ever seen.
No, that's really something, and obviously we'll be watching that very closely. And, of course, with these two teams set to play, Georgia and Texas, we've seen them square off in recruiting a lot. And, Texas is coming to Georgia, we believe, using some of its prodigious financial resources to take a couple of players away that Georgia would have liked to have had. Georgia's obviously had its success in Texas, too. By now, that's all been well chronicled. We've also been trained over the years to understand that the head-to-head result of a game like this doesn't always pay as much in the way of recruiting dividends as you might think. But when it comes to the perception of these two programs, Texas trying to sell itself as a destination, Georgia trying to demonstrate that it's still every bit the same program it was during its national championship era a couple of years ago. How much does the winner of this game get to further that storyline, whichever side it ends up being?
Well, I think one thing it does is, Georgia as the reigning SEC champions, they should have a seat at the table, especially with the top 5 program they have right now. I think with Texas, this would really take a lot of air out of the balloon right there for them, because they can't really have much to claim for anything. They might even not even come late Saturday evening. They might not even have the best quarterback in this game when you talk about that Gunner versus Arch matchup. But I will say this about Texas, and I love how you coyly use the term prodigious resources and Texas size resources perhaps to acquire talent. It was pretty funny. We're talking to some people at the event last night, Brandon, and they were talking about Texas and how they can acquire talent. And somebody else at the table, some of the troublemakers, that were there, they were like, well, that's not recruiting. That's like me recruiting the waitress to come over and bring us another beverage. We're compensating them for that effort. But this is the one thing, though, Brandon, it should give folks some pause. Brandon, it is not every Saturday when Georgia can look across the field and see a roster that is very well put together, perhaps as well put together as Georgia's own roster is. Or just go back to last year, Brandon, Texas, and they did some prodigious recruiting and some prodigious incentivizing to acquire talent last year, but they had the number 1 recruiting class in the country, Brandon. And there's very rarely, only Alabama, maybe some years, Georgia didn't play Texas A&M when they were trying to buy all of college football's future stars, where Georgia meets a program that has recruited better of late. And you look at the last 4 years, Brandon, Georgia on the average has the number 2 recruiting class in the country. Well, the Horns have the number 3 recruiting class in the country. Well, they've got the players, but it just doesn't seem like the developmental track is on the same arc that it is right now with Georgia and this young team seemingly getting better each and every week.
And yet when I look at what could lead Texas, if it has a chance with this game tomorrow, it's some of the recruiting work they've done that I think gives it a chance to do that. Their offensive line this year, not as good as it was a year ago, but this is probably the toughest defensive front that Georgia's seen all year, which makes it, I think, the best defense that Georgia has played all year, too. For all the attention that Arch Manning gets, and, guys like Ryan Wingo and some of the other more high-profile names get a lot of attention. one of the things, and really in the case of Sark, he started this before they came to the SEC. Part of the reason why they beat Alabama on the road in 2023 and won the Big 12 in their final year in that conference in 2023 was because they started making this into more of an SEC-style roster then in anticipation of their arrival into the SEC for their first season in 2024. So while I would love to tell everybody watching and listening right now that's going to be easy, Texas is still a pretender and Georgia knows what the real SEC is all about. To his credit, Steve Sarkisian, over the course of time, has made Texas, along the lines of scrimmage, look more like an SEC-style program. They're not great on the offensive line this year. Most of our audience knows that. But as a program overall, over the course of the last 3 years, they are far more trench-heavy than Texas was for 20 years prior to that. Did Jeff freeze up on us? All right, so Jeff is frozen up on us, so we'll tap dance here for a second. We'll see if we have to even get him back on the phone for a second. We'll give him a chance to do that, and we'll continue the point that we were making, which is that, I do have respect for Texas. I don't like Texas, and I don't like the way in which the media talks about Texas. I think that Texas has been, over the course of a couple of years now, unfairly hyped up. I do think they had a pretty easy entrance into the SEC, but I do believe that Sark has become a real coach, and I do believe he's made Texas into a real program. And I think along the lines of scrimmage, even their offensive line this year is not great. I do think that has been one of the things that has made it be what it is. And while I do expect Georgia to win, and as I talked about this yesterday, I have gotten more confident in Georgia because of how it's played this season, especially lately, how it played against Texas in both of its games a year ago. Never gave up 20 points to Texas. 15 last October, 19 last December. All of that adds to a situation in which, going into a big November game, I'm about as confident in Georgia as I'm going to be. On the flip side of that, well, I don't know that quite means that I just completely disregard Texas either. I think that Texas is still a pretty dangerous team. And if our story, those of us who are immersed in and entrenched with Georgia, is about how much better Georgia's gotten over the course of the season, well, I think you'd have to say the same thing about Texas, too. This is a team that has also gotten better as the season has gone along. And I think they are just as eager to demonstrate that tomorrow as Georgia is. And one more thing, and then we'll hopefully have Jeff Sentell back with us. The other thing that's interesting about this game, away from the recruiting part, what Texas has done, what they hope to do if they were able to win tomorrow and selling to future recruits, it is interesting to note that Texas has had its problems away from home this year. The game against Kentucky, they were lucky to win it. The game against Florida, they lost it. Also lost Ohio State. Now, listen, that's on the road, the number one team in the country. You don't necessarily have to apologize for that. But we have not really seen Texas be at its best when it comes to the games outside of Austin. Last year, we thought that Texas was gifted a schedule. And for the most part, they feasted on those lesser opponents to get the record that they got. This year, you got Steve Sarkisian complaining because he feels like their SEC schedule's backloaded. I hate to tell Sark this, but you got to play somebody. And, this idea that it's going to be easy for you every single time, we don't necessarily think that's the case. And away from home, that is where the Texas troubles have come. At Florida, at Ohio State, a little shaky against Kentucky. We've seen the game in Starkville too. You have to count that as well, where it's been just a little shaky for Texas when they have left Darrell K. Royal Memorial Stadium this year. They've had that issue. So anyway, that's the case there. Do we have Jeff Sentell? Is he coming back? Okay, let me do one more thing then before we get ready to bring Jeff back on. I'll remind you of this real quick, that you've heard us. Let me just, okay, well, we'll jump to Jeff, and then we'll figure that out later on. Apologize for all the bouncing around there. Jeff, let's bring you back in here right now. We were talking about the fact, I forget where you and I were, just the fact that I do think that Texas has done a really good job in populating both its lines of scrimmage. They're not great on offense with their offensive line this year, but this is still a Texas team that's pretty deep on the trenches, and certainly I think that Sark deserves a lot of credit for building a team that looks like an SEC team.
Definitely, Brandon. One of the things he did is he's kind of seen as this savvy play caller that is going to dial up a lot of scheme. But right now, really, it looks like all he's doing is doing those extended handoffs and short screens, trying to get the ball in the hands of its playmakers. And you see a couple of receivers on that team, Ryan Wingo, DeAndre Moore, that Georgia definitely wanted to try and bring over to its program. So that's something to think about there. And Brandon, I tell you one thing. I know you've got a lot of friends. You got a lot of guys that call the dogs, root for the dogs, talk the dogs. And most of my text messages, people are very they're a little too confident. You know how Vince Dooley used to worry about every little thing, or Munson used to worry about every little thing. There are people in the group chats that are sensing Georgia being able to expose and take advantage of this Texas team. And therefore, the lack of worry about this team is causing others to worry about it. But I think one thing Sark realized that from maybe his time at Alabama, and maybe because of those resources, is that he knew he had to be able to have a team that can win the trench wars up front in order to kind of compete at the highest levels of this league, or to even be dubbed the epicenter or all roads run through Austin in the SEC.
So let me do a couple of things with you real quick before we let you go. A guy that I talked to you about a week or two ago, recent decommit from Clemson, Blake Stewart from Woodward Academy. Stewart is expected to visit Georgia tomorrow too. Now it seems like he's got a handful of schools that he's considering on the heels of his Clemson decommitment, but this is a player that I've seen this year in person on both sides of the ball. Pretty impressive. He's obviously a defensive back if he were to come to Georgia, but it seems like there is some late work being done for Georgia with guys in this 2026 class, whether it be Stewart there tomorrow or some other interesting late ads. Tell me what is still potentially left for Georgia in this current recruiting cycle.
Well, Brandon, first of all, the great Terrence Edwards kind of shouted out Blake Stewart recently when I wrote about him this week on DawgNation. And he said, this is a KJ Bolden type player. He has those type of skills on both sides of the ball. And that's really all in the endorsement I think DawgNation would ever need, Brandon. And you look at Georgia's defensive back group and you see there that the Dogs definitely do. There's potentially a name on that DB commit list that may not stick because of off the field reasons. And then you see a player like Stewart, who's great on both sides of the ball. His coaches at Woodward Academy tell me that he's the closest thing they've seen to Travis Hunter since Travis Hunter left for Jackson, Mississippi, and then on his way to Colorado to win a Heisman. So those are things that you watch Blake Stewart play. And Brandon, this is what's really interesting. This is one of the things I wrote about. You have a senior who has about 4 or 5 schools on his list. Georgia is one of them. And he has about 3 weeks to figure it out. Brandon, that's what recruiting used to be like. And it is very much an old school recruitment there with Blake Stewart. Now, there's a Vanderbilt in the mix there, Brandon. There's Miami definitely in the mix. And I believe this Stewart visit is going to be a kick the tires visit where he sees basic things like the facilities, the weight room, the locker room, and he has a real conversation about just how much he's valued by Georgia. And I think from there, things will either elevate or then they will go their own way. This is a big weekend for a lot of guys, Brennan. It's mostly the 2027 guys. I think watch for it, wait for it. This will be a weekend that sees multiple commitments go Georgia's way, and it's going to be in the lower classes. It's not going to be the seniors. Perhaps the number one storyline left in terms of a likely potential ad for Georgia is Tyreek Jemison out of Paulding County. He's a 3-star offensive lineman. He tells me that Georgia has recruited him harder ever since the junior college offensive tackle, Mr. Mitchell, Jermaine Mitchell, committed to Georgia. And he says that love has kind of increased since then, Brandon. He told me, and he used these words very specifically, he said a lot of glowing things about Georgia, but he also said that Georgia is still even or neck and neck, and it's close with him and Ole Miss. Now, Tyreek is going to visit Georgia on back-to-back weekends. His offensive and defensive line coaches are going to be there this weekend for Texas, and then the following weekend, his family will be with him for the Charlotte game, and that will be an official visit, and he will know what he wants to do after that. So you look at those things right there. Is Georgia going to chase Blake Stewart? What's going to happen with some of these committed names that's been on Georgia's radar, I know, even on their commitment board for months with their off-the-field issues? Will they stick? And then what about Tyreek Jemison? I think those are the main talking points right now down the home stretch of this season, Brandon. But I will reiterate, this feels exactly like with Blake Stewart, the way things used to go all the time. back in 2021, 2022, before everybody decided to commit and lock their recruiting down in June and July.
So let me do one final thing with you tonight. I'm looking forward to being on Atlanta News First for the start of the GHSA High School Football State Playoffs. We've got a tremendous round of 32 game between Sprayberry hosting Lee County. Lee County, about as good a team as you'll ever see, go on the road for a playoff game, but that's what they're forced to do tonight, being the 3 seed of an incredibly deep region. My point, though, Jeff, is in previous instances in this conversation, we've talked about Keelan Jones before from Sprayberry. That's Georgia commit. I want to ask you about the other team here today, though. In preparations for broadcasting Lee County tonight, I've been really impressed with Jaden Upshaw. That's a junior receiver for Lee County. This is, to me, a really good-looking prospect. How involved might Georgia be with a guy like Jaden Upshaw, 2027 receiver out of Lee County? Because, like I said, watching the Trojans here, getting ready to have him on TV tonight, I have really liked what Upshaw's brought to the table.
Brandon, you're not wrong. I mean, Jaden, I would say he's probably right now the top junior receiver prospect in the state. Georgia loves him. He's feeling the love definitely from the Dogs, and that'll be a big showcase game for him to come into the metro area. Everybody calls him J5, and I spoke to him over the last week about his interest at Georgia. Brandon, he will be in Athens this weekend for this game as well. That will be another trip he's taking to see Georgia, and he's got a list, Brandon. He's one of those traditional guys that probably has about 10 or 12 schools he's looking at, but I believe him when he says this, and I consider this to be accurate, that Georgia would be one of the teams to definitely watch there for Jaden Upshaw. And this is why, Brandon, and this is crazy, a top-rated receiver. When I asked him what is the best thing about his game, what are the things people should really notice about him that would make him an elite prospect, Brendan, he went on for about a minute about his blocking and how he likes taking guys to the track and how he likes punishing guys. And he says there's a lot of receivers that can make all the catches. They can get separation. They can get loose. They can score touchdowns. But it is a rare breed. It is a different type of guy for the one that will take the field knowing that he's got to punish the man in front of him as one of his core job descriptions of being a receiver, Brandon. And if that ain't Kirby Smart's vernacular for a wide receiver prospect, I don't know what it is, sir.
I think that's really good. We'll see him tonight at Atlanta News First, a really good Lee County team against a terrific Sprayberry team that it does have a Georgia commit in Keelan Jones. And I guess just real quick, give me 30 more seconds on Jones. We've talked about him before. I really like this young man. I think he's really, really tough. The last time we saw him, we didn't see him in pass coverage very much just because they're obviously not going to challenge him and Jordan Edmonds too much. Edmonds going to Alabama. But Jones on TV tonight is also a guy that I think the Georgia fans ought to tune in to see because he is coming to Georgia for this class of 2026.
Definitely, Brandon. He's a legacy. His mother went to Georgia. And this is one of those kids that basically when he got the Georgia offer, he was done, man. Georgia identified him really early. Georgia has 3 really great safeties in this class right now. Keelan makes a lot of touchdowns and makes a lot of highlights on Before the Hedges as a running back.
Yes, he does.
I predict you'll see Keelan Jones get in the end zone there as a running back for Sprayberry tonight. But he is a fly up the field, be physical, get in your face type safety. He's going to be a bigger safety, Brandon, and he's a guy that it was so funny when everybody was checking in during the real recruiting season, which was like March, April, May, when everybody was trying to figure things out that they used to do back during the fall schedules on game day visits. He was committed to Georgia, and people asked him, like, okay, are you shut down? Or what's the status? Are you still talking to other schools? And he's like, man, I'm a dog. Like when I committed, I was done. I didn't know I need to tell anybody I was shut down because committed to Keelan Jones means that he's already bleeding red and black and couldn't wait to bleed red and black. And this is one of those guys. We look for it. The guys that have a lot of success at Georgia are the ones that want to be there. And Keelan is definitely one of those guys.
Jeff, great stuff. Appreciate it. Looking forward to seeing you in Athens tomorrow. Looking forward to really what we hope is one of the more memorable days in the history of Sanford Stadium. Georgia hosting Texas Between the Hedges tomorrow night. An unbelievable spectacle and what we think has a chance to be a terrific Georgia win, too. Thanks for being here on DawgNation Daily, presented by Kroger today. And we will talk to you next week again at the same time.
Hey, Brandon, can't wait to see you in the Classic City for another big one, man. Have a good call tonight.
Thanks a lot. Appreciate that, Jeff.
Let's take a look around the rest of the league. This is SEC Through.
Yeah, we got SEC Through coming up in a moment. Let me just give a quick shout out before we get there. How about our friends at Georgia Farm Bureau? You know, we talked to Jeff about homegrown recruits. Obviously, in the state of Georgia, we love stuff grown in Georgia. We celebrate that all the time. And our friends at Georgia Farm Bureau feel the exact same way. They love taking care of Georgia's farmers, and they've supported them so many ways through the years, including serving them when it comes to their insurance needs. And they want to do the same thing for you. Auto insurance, home insurance, even life insurance, and the financial services products that we think of in that lane. Georgia Farm Bureau, let's take care of you on all of that. And when you pick up the phone and have questions about your insurance policy or the need to make a claim, what you're going to find out is on the other side of that phone call is a friendly person, a Georgian just like you in a community just like yours in our great state, claims adjusters the same way. So I want you to do it today. Give them a call, 877-404-1050. That's 877-404-1050 or online, gfbinsurance.com, and find out today why Georgia Farm Bureau is always the home team. All right, let's get ready to do a little SEC Through talk with you, and let's talk about some of the big games for the upcoming weekend. Let me start with Oklahoma going to Alabama. We've seen Bama, much like the Georgia game, as about a 6.5-point favorite for a lot here this week. I like Oklahoma to keep this close. I do. I'd be surprised if Oklahoma won the game, but I do think this is worth watching as a lead-in to the Georgia-Texas game. I do think it could be entertaining. This Oklahoma defense is for real. Now, they had their issues, on the road at Tennessee, but they still won the game. And frankly, this is an Alabama offense that I've had some questions about lately. They really don't have much of a running game. I think that Ty Simpson may be the best quarterback in college football today. He's not going to win the Heisman Trophy. It seems like that's likely to be either Fernando Mendoza or Julian Sayin right now. But if somebody made a passionate argument for Simpson being the best quarterback in college football, I could listen to that. He certainly looked very good against Georgia. We don't deny that. But even with Simpson having the kind of year that he's had, this has not always been a super explosive Alabama offense. And for an offense that hasn't always found the explosive plays, they are not easy to find against this Oklahoma defense, even if you are playing at home. Now, John Mateer has not had a great season. Some of that's injury, some of that's whatever. Probably some of it's just a step up in competition compared to what he's used to. But is there a chance this one stays a little bit close? I do. And by the way, I also think this, that if we're talking about, hey, which 9-3 team could potentially make the college football playoff, Texas got some love for that. For Oklahoma, even if it loses tomorrow, especially if it loses close, I think that Oklahoma really deserves to be a part of the playoff conversation. After all, if the big defense of Texas is, well, they lost their non-conference game to Ohio State, it's a better defense for Oklahoma because they won a non-conference game against Michigan. I think they deserve some credit for that. I am interested in Oklahoma right now. I think they have a chance to keep this one close. I'll also mention Missouri hosting Mississippi State. Now, as a hardcore SEC guy, I think this is a really fun game. This is Mississippi State trying to get one more win for bowl eligibility. They're sitting at 5 right now. They need one more for 6. Not going to be easy for them the rest of the way. Egg Bowl to close the season. Missouri tomorrow. Not going to be easy to get that 6th win, but nonetheless, they have a chance to get in. That'd be a huge accomplishment for Jeff Levy. On the other side of this is a Missouri team looking for 2 more wins to exceed its season win total. And from that standpoint, I do like Missouri here in this spot. I think they've been the better team over the course of the season. Eli Drinkwitz said something really interesting this week where he talked about how I do still think there is too much of a fixation with who makes the college football playoff. And even in a world of an expanded playoff, there's only room for 12 teams to make it. And I don't think, especially for teams of a certain level, I don't think you can define success by did you make the playoff or not. I think you've got to have more, you got to have a wider range of possible outcomes than that. This is a Missouri team that's like 6th in the SEC offensively yards per play, 3rd in yards per play allowed defensively. This is a Missouri team that has a chance to go 8-4. That is a good season. They were never quite a true playoff team, and if Prabilla doesn't get hurt, their quarterback, they may exceed their season win total easily. As it stands right now, I think they still probably get there. But I do think that Drinkwitz is right, that sometimes you got to define a good season as something other than just making the college football playoff. And for Missouri, I think it still has time to have and an opportunity to have a very good season. Let me give you a couple of games outside the SEC here right now. I'm fascinated by Pitt hosting Notre Dame. Pitt's becoming one of the more interesting teams in college football in the month of November because they got 3 big games that could put Pitt into a spot where it's competing for the playoff in a ACC title game. They play Notre Dame tomorrow. They still got Miami, and they still got Tech left on their schedule before the season is done. I do think that Pat Narduzzi, the Pitt coach, said something interesting this week, and you probably heard this if you followed college football closely. He basically said he doesn't care if they lose this game tomorrow 100-0, that the game for them against Notre Dame does not matter whatsoever. It's a weird thing for a coach to say, but it's also accurate. Pitt's postseason success is going to be determined by how it plays against Georgia Tech and Miami. He probably doesn't think he's going to beat Notre Dame. They're already fairly sizable underdogs. And with the true incentive to win these games against the ACC, if I had to guess, I believe that Pitt probably plays like that on Saturday. They have a fairly long injury list for this game. A lot of those guys, I assume, won't play. Notre Dame's pretty tough to beat anyway. I do think Pitt probably just tries to get through this one to be as healthy as it can for the 2 ACC games it still has to play. That's going to determine whether or not it can actually compete for the college football playoff. So when a coach like this gives you an indication of what his mindset is, I think you should believe him. I don't think Pitt has much for Notre Dame tomorrow. I'll also mention this. Duke hosts Virginia. And if you care about point spreads, what was interesting about this is that Duke's fairly sizable favorite in this game, even though Virginia's ranked in the college football playoff top 25. Now, Virginia's quarterback is hurt, Chandler Morris. There is some dispute about whether or not he'll play here, but the truth is, even if he does play, the better quarterback in the game has probably been Darian Mintz, the Duke quarterback. They spent big on him to get him on the transfer portal after having been at Tulane the previous year. And Duke is a team that can just ruin the entire scenario for the ACC. They have a pretty good chance of playing for the ACC championship game, even though Duke's already lost 4 times. They've lost 3 games outside the conference. That'd be a disaster for the ACC. And if you've been paying attention to college football in recent years, you know that whatever the disastrous scenario is for the ACC, that's typically what comes true. They're like a 5.5, 6 point favorite, depending on where you see this. Anytime you see the unranked team favored over the ranked team, there's usually something going on here. And in this case, I think there's a lot of steam around the notion that Duke's just the right side, whether Chandler Morris plays or not. So that is worth considering. We'll also have a pick, if you're watching on video, coming up for USC hosting Iowa. That's during our R.S. Andrews cool down. Or if you're listening podcast radio today, maybe it's worth seeking out the video for the end of the show. If you're interested in that, I'll give you a couple of best bets here too coming up in a moment. But for now, we'll make that our SEC through. And before we wrap things up today, can I just do one thing before we get there? I just want to give you a quick shout out about something. So one of the things you've been hearing me talk about a little bit lately, our friends from Pella, Window and Door of Georgia, and I saw Cassidy and Brian from 2 Bryans from Pella last night. So I was able to see both of them. All of them, I should say. They've had the ongoing opportunity for you to win a pair of tickets to the Georgia Tech game, and these are our sweet tickets. These are really nice tickets for Georgia and Georgia Tech coming up on Black Friday afternoon, and all you've had to do is schedule your consultation with Pella for your chance to win on that. I do want to remind you, this is the last day to do that. So if you've been hearing us talk about that, this is the last day to do that. You can check out the websites, Pella. Let's just do this. Go to PellaGA.com, PellaGA.com, and you can get there that way. Get your consultation scheduled. Let them know, hey, BA said this is our last day to get this scheduled for my chance to win the Georgia Tech tickets. If you just go to PellaGA.com, that'll get you where you need to go, PellaGA.com. This is your last day to schedule that consultation. Scheduling that appointment is your registration for your chance to win the Georgia Tech tickets. So reach out to them. Let them know that BA said this was the last day to do it. I want to get in on that. Make sure you know that's what you're doing. Yeah, PellaGA.com/dogs. So that's the way to go find out about all this. PellaGA.com/dogs. That's the way to jump in there, be a part of that. Last day to schedule that appointment. You can get the appointment scheduled for any time in the future, I believe. You just got to get it scheduled by today. So let them know that's what you want to do. PellaGA.com/dogs. And you could be in to win a pair of amazing tickets in our suite for Georgia and Georgia Tech coming up on Black Friday afternoon. So I wanted to make sure you're aware of that before we wrap things up here today. And as we conclude both our show and our week, a fun look back on our DawgNation On Tap event last night to say goodbye to you here. A couple of golden shoes themed around that. How about Kevin, who's Wheezy Medic on X, sharing a great picture of him and a friend and hanging out with me last night, among others. He says, thank you all for tonight. Kevin, I'm going to say thank you and to everybody who came out last night. He was also supporting Madison County there, which is a fun thing to see, Madison County High School. So to all of you who came out to support us last night, really appreciate that. What an amazing experience that was. It was so much fun to hang out with so many great Georgia fans. Just really, really appreciate that opportunity. So Kevin will give you a golden shoe for a great series of pictures you shared with us. How about another golden shoe going here as well? Our guy Texas Dog, who was there last night, says he thinks that Cody deserves a golden shoe for all the great camera work that he does. Cody Chafin's there last night working that camera. That's why we had such great video to show you today, because of the work that Cody was doing. Also taking his job very seriously. So we'll give Texas Dog a golden shoe for the recommendation of Cody, and that will be a lot of fun. And another guy who was there last night's our guy Richard Dees. He shared this with me earlier this week, and I wanted to give it as a golden shoe today. So going back to the Cotton Bowl at the conclusion of the 1983 season, when Georgia beat Texas 10-9, and if you grew up like me, you know what time is it in Texas? It's always 10-9. We remember that. Well, he's got a great artist rendition of that win for Georgia, autographed by Vince Dooley. What an amazing Georgia football artifact that is, and how much fun is that? I appreciate Richard sharing that with me. We'll give a golden shoe there on that. Great memories of the 1984 Cotton Bowl from the conclusion of the 1983 season, and a great chance for Georgia to get another one of those wins against Texas on Saturday. Great way to close out our week. Lousy stinking Gators will also remind you, been a long time since Florida's beaten Georgia. How about our Gator Hater Updater, 1,833 days. That is how long it's been since Florida's beaten our dogs. Y'all have a great weekend. We'll see you all day tomorrow. Kaylee's got you for the pregame show from Jittery Joe's coming up at 5:30. I'll see you after the game from the DawgNation postgame call-in show right there at the UGA bookstore immediately after the game, all day long. Talking Georgia, Texas. We'll do that with you then, and we'll see you back here on Monday for DawgNation Daily presented by Kroger. Hope you'll come back and see us then, everybody. And on video. Time now for the R.S. Andrews Cool Down. R.S. Andrews, when you turn to for your air conditioning, heating, plumbing, electric needs. They show up on time. They do the work that's promised, the price promised. You can trust them on that today. Please keep that graphic up just for 1 second, because I accidentally knocked my, I knocked my internet cord out. So let me reach down here and grab that, and then we'll take a couple comments for a second. My hardwire internet's getting a little bit loose, and so I keep knocking it out. All right, let's get some comments, and we'll see how folks are doing. On here at DawgNation.com just for a moment. DT, by the way, it's good to see. Definitely we haven't seen DT in a while. It's good to see him. He says that was a cool piece from our guy Richard Dees. It really was a very good thing. Will Dickerson gives you, it's a time to be an alpha dog. And boy, Will, I'm always glad to see you. And yeah, we need some alpha dogs tomorrow. And we do expect alpha dogs to show up against Texas for sure. Rambo, who was there with us last night, shows up to say, great event, well attended, nice to meet you. And Rambo, it was great to meet you too. I really appreciate your commentary in here. Always love that, and great to see you in person last night, which was great. I agree with Senior Dog 54. I think that I think the American League MVP went to the wrong guy. I do. I think the Mariners catcher should have got it. So DT's been in the hospital. DT, our prayers to you. I'm so sorry to hear that. I hope that you're doing okay. Our prayers for you, but we're glad to have you here today. Very glad. Very glad. Johnny Prescott, who was also there with us last night, says, we haven't even hit Thanksgiving. Y'all are handing out presents. Indeed, that's the case. We had a great time last night. It was a lot of fun. Farm Dog says you can use some, he calls it Biotine mouthwash before the show. It'll help your voice, and drink water during the show. If you can get the bottle open, which is obviously a reference to Billy Napier, who once couldn't do that. Yeah, I would say that my voice is a little worse today. Used it a lot last night. Got high school football tonight. Big long day in Athens tomorrow. It is going to be very interesting to see what this is like when it's all said and done. Very interesting to see what it's like. Let's see what else. Yeah, so I agree. Well, why am I blanking on his name? The Mariners catcher. He should have been the American League MVP. I agree on that. The big dumper. I don't know why I'm blanking on his name, but yes. You could tell I'm tired. Let's check out YouTube here for a moment. Cal Raleigh. Thank you very much. Cal Raleigh. Thank you. I don't know why I blanked on that. Will checks in to say that he hopes it's a stress-free game tomorrow. He says, but that hasn't happened very much for Georgia this season. No, unfortunately, that's not the case. But it'd be a good time for that to start against Texas for sure. G. Gray says about Miami moving up the rankings. Yeah, I mean, they obviously had a big jump this past week. And, I mean, like the one thing that the committee loves doing, like all college sports, they like to keep their options open. And so, yeah, the option of moving up Miami as a potential at-large team, yes, they are definitely going to keep them close enough to make that for consideration. And it was almost a complete reconsideration of Miami after having been so low last week. Obviously, they did not want to put Louisville, if you're going to respect the head-to-head for Miami over Notre Dame, you got the issue with Louisville, and so now that Louisville and Virginia lost, they just moved Miami up. Jerry Dog fan says it's about time to get Dale Murphy and Andrew Jones in the Hall of Fame. I agree on both fronts on that, and as we've talked about in here, it has been interesting to watch the movement with Dale Murphy as of late. I love the fact that Murphy seems to be getting some new steam for his induction. And I think the case for Murphy is far better than it's often given credit for. I feel that way about Andrew Jones too, but I think that Murphy right now really seems to have some momentum, which is good. Let's see what else. Yeah, Texas Dog, who was there last night. Listen, talking to him, now Texas Dog lives in Georgia again now, and Texas has been battling some health stuff too, so we got prayers going out for him too. But he was talking to me last night about how much this game means to him and all his Texas folks who've talked to him so much. And, so much of our audience, just kind of ties back to where you live, who you hang out with, and who you're around. And, getting a chance to talk to Texas Dog last night, really just putting it out there about how much this win would mean for him and everybody else who's in that world. Man, I hope Georgia gets it. I really do. I hope Georgia gets it. Caleb Myers enjoys hearing from Jeff Sentell. Yeah, Jeff's a great guy. We're very, very thrilled to have him as part of our show each week. A truly great guy. Avian Curry asking about Justice Terry. I don't really think that Terry's played very much for Texas this year. That's interesting. I don't know what that would have been like for him had he been at Georgia, but he has not really played much for Texas this year. He's played very much for Texas this year. Let's check out Facebook here. Somebody said my voice was annoying. Yeah, listen, I'm sorry about that. I apologize. I'm not going to stop doing the show, but I am obviously battling my voice pretty hard here right now. So if you can tolerate it and keep watching and listening, I appreciate that. And if you can't, I wish you well with whatever you decide to do. But it's as good as it's going to be for right now. It is as good as it's going to be for right now. Let's see what else. Bill Sanders, by the way, give me a hard time. See, I feel like I've been doing much better on Facebook lately. I've gotten Facebook to load a little faster, so I've done much better with Facebook lately. Miriam Corbin says, I can't wait to be in Sanford Stadium tomorrow night. It's going to be rocking. Yes, indeed, it's going to be. Yes, indeed, it's going to be. Ulysses Dunning's good to see him checking in here too. Jamie Huff on the possibility that maybe Justice Terry's a portal I mean, listen, you never know. I mean, you never know, right? I mean, I'm guessing they probably still have pretty big plans for him, and I'm guessing that whatever deal they had with him was of the multi-year variety, if I had to guess. But I guess you never know. Mike Brown, thank you for the prayers for my voice. Yeah, I mean, look, it's been okay. It's probably a little worse now. And y'all got to know, I don't like talking about myself very much. I mean, I don't have much of a history of talking about myself. I am a little self-conscious about it just because it's cracked a few times. And the one thing I can't do is I can't quite get as excited as I typically get. I'm not able to quite do that. But I appreciate y'all powering through. I do. Chris is talking about bringing back the bracelets again. And yeah, I guess Georgia's doing that tomorrow. I like the lights. I do. My thing is, lights don't make noise. And so while I'm happy to have the LEDs back, for me, it all comes down to, hey, what kind of music are you pairing with the crowd noise to make it build to the proper crescendo? I'm all in favor of the lights. I think they look really cool. But the look doesn't create noise. It's really about the music to create that noise. And as I told you, I think yesterday, for as big a fan as I am of the Redcoats, I do think you got to have that pulsating noise on second, third, and fourth down. I think you got to find a way to do that every single time. Let's see what else. Barcelona King checks in to say it's going to be a rough game for Arch tomorrow. He says, quote that, BA. Barcelona, I appreciate that. And I hope that you are proven correct on that, because that'll be a big thing if it turns out to be true. So I appreciate that. All right, let's see what else. Gary Roach asking about Cody Chaffins and the camera from a year ago. Somebody else actually asked about that a little earlier too. I don't think we ever got paid out for that. So I don't believe we ever did, which means we got to take our payback against Texas on the field tomorrow, for sure. Also, there's no truth to the rumor that they're not selling water bottles in the visitor section tomorrow. I can't confirm that's true. Tony Huff says, as much as I speak, I'm surprised you have a voice at all. Yeah, I mean, especially weekends like this, you just really feel like you're burning it big here right now. All right. Let's see what else. Rambo giving some suggestions. I appreciate that. All right, let's do, we're about to give you our official pick for USC, Iowa coming up. I'll also give you I'm actually going to make my pick live here in a moment. I'm going to give you a couple of best bets, too, because I had to pop off the show on Wednesday when they were doing this. Johnny sending some prayers DT's way, and I appreciate that. Andrew Sisson says he's hoping that his voice sounds like mine at the conclusion of Saturday night's game, and I think that's a pretty good idea. I'm looking forward to that. Murphy, thanks for checking in. Appreciate that, who was there last night. Man, that's awesome, Murphy. I appreciate that. We had a lot of folks there. We had a lot of folks travel a long way to be there. Oregon, Minnesota, Utah. I mean, I'm just so thankful for so many people who are just really kind. And the job that I have doing what I do, it's amazing how many Georgia fans you get to meet. And when you meet all these Georgia fans, you're really reinforced with just how a special group of people Georgia fans really are. So that's awesome. Okay, so we're going to do a couple more comments on the other side of this. But as a part of our R.S. Andrews Cool Down on Fridays, we always give you a taste of Go With The Flow, presented by R.S. Andrews. Our official pick for USC, hosting Iowa, expecting rain for that one, by the way. And a couple of other picks from me, too, here on the other side. Let's give you a taste of that right now with the entire DawgNation team, minus me, my pick to come on the other side. This is from Wednesday's edition of Go With The Flow as a part of our R.S. Andrews Cool Down right now.
Welcome in. This is the R.S. Andrews Cool Down, a special segment that we do as a part of our show Go With The Flow, where all of our insiders pick the top matchups on the week based on a point spread perspective. Of course, I am Kaylee Mansell, joined by Mike Griffith, Jeff Sentell, Connor Riley, Dari Payro. After this is up, Brandon Adams will make his pick live on the show. We picked 5 other games, so make sure to go back and check on this week's episode of Go With The Flow. But we do have one last pick we wanted to save for today, and then of course everybody gets the chance to be creative and put their own best bets in for the week. But the last game that we have to pick is Iowa headed to Southern Cal. Southern Cal getting 6.5 at home this season. Iowa 6-3, played a really close game against Oregon last week, ended up losing that game 18-16, but kept it really close for the majority of the game. This year, 5-1 against the spread in conference games. USC 7-2 on the year, 4-1 against the spread as the home favorite. Mike, we come to you and your new system. What are you going to do with Iowa going to Southern Cal? Southern Cal being 6.5-point favorites. What's your pick?
I wish I could give some advice to the college football playoff committee on a system that made sense. Iowa lost and only dropped one spot. It's purely because they want to maintain them as a top 25 team to prop up the Big Ten teams. There's just so much hocus pocus going on in these college football rankings. It's unfortunate. I suppose they call that entertainment. I call that a travesty. I think that Iowa's a different team when they travel and when they get called for penalties, because if I'm not mistaken, they may have only had one penalty called or two penalties called in their game against Oregon. And yet Dan Lanning's troops were able to march out of there with a victory, as I said they would on the show. Unfortunately, they didn't cover the spread. And the system kind of let me down there. No system needed here. USC is a hot team. It's in a big media market. Makes sense for people to want them to win. That's what's going to happen. So give me USC to beat Iowa. And somehow the Hawkeyes will stay in the top 25 with 4 losses probably.
Yeah, so the majority of our panel actually took Oregon last week. As Mike said, Oregon got the win, but it wasn't enough for them to cover. Iowa was able to keep it close. Jeff, what are you going to do with your pick? Are you going to side with Mike and take the favorite, or are you going to take another flyer on Iowa?
Need a clarification, though, for the official record here. Mike, is that a system-endorsed pick, the one you just made there with Iowa and USC? Did that go through the assembly line?
Yeah, it did. It didn't really need to, but yeah. I mean, it's kind of like NASCAR these days. The guy you think's supposed to win usually wins.
I think Iowa on the road going to Los Angeles will be different. I did think the Iowa Hawkeyes showed me a little something last week with Dan Lanning and his Ducks, but I like USC to cover in this one.
Connor, I can't remember if you were the only one or one of two to take Iowa. Are you going to continue that streak this week and take them again, or are you going to take Southern Cal along with Mike and Jeff?
So important couple things to note here. USC's 80th in the country in run defense. I do think that leaves open some possibility here for Iowa, but USC gets an extra day of rest to prepare for this game. They played on a Friday night last week, whereas Oregon and Iowa played a 4-quarter knockdown drag-out game. I think that shows up a little bit. Also, only once has Iowa gone to the West Coast time zone since the Big Ten has expanded. They did that last year. They went to UCLA, and they lost as a favorite in that game. They're an underdog this time around. At 6.5, I like USC here. At 7.5, I would probably be taking Iowa, but because of the factors working in USC's favor, Iowa having to go across the country, the extra day of rest, I think that makes an impact for a USC team that is playing for a lot more, because if they win this week, they set up a massive game against Oregon the following week. So give me USC here to cover by a touchdown.
Yeah, I think I've probably been 50-50 on our USC games this year, but them hosting this game at home is enough for me to feel comfortable in taking them. I feel like maybe, I've not always been the highest on Lincoln Riley, but this is a really tough road game for Iowa. They're a decent team, but I don't think that it's going to be enough going on the road. So I'm also going to take Southern Cal. Dari, clean sweep, flow on the side of Southern Cal. Are you going to do the same?
I came in thinking one thing. I said I would choose whatever Connor says, because this is probably if you asked him 3 years ago or 4 years ago, before all these conference changes, dream matchups of his Iowa Hawkeyes and Pac-10, this would probably be one of those in that mix. I'm kind of torn on this. Connor's. He said a 6.5, and if it's 7.5, I'm gonna go the other way. I can see Iowa getting a cover here because they are going to be able to run the ball and run the clock down and really slow down the tempo of USC. So I'm going to go with my initial gut, and I'm gonna take Iowa to get this cover. I think USC is looking ahead a bit for Oregon. I think they're going to win this game at home. I think Iowa's going to find a way to get a cover because I think they're going to shorten this game. So give me the Hawkeyes here. I'll go against the grain of everyone, and we'll see what happens.
Dari, if it makes you feel any better, I am rubber stamping that pick because of the fact that everyone is on USC. I think that only helps Iowa's case this week. I'm not changing my pick, but I think Iowa's chances have just been helped by the way this panel has gone down.
And
Good,
honestly, too,
I need
it's
it.
good.
I'm on a sliding skid right now.
And at this point, if everybody took USC, then that game basically doesn't even count for anyone. It doesn't change their rankings whatsoever. So I'm glad that somebody on the panel picked Iowa. That way it just keeps things interesting at this point. So that was our last game that we had to do of the week. But now we do best bets where you can bet on anything, whether that's spread, money line, over-unders. You can give as many as you want or as few as you want. With that, we'll go ahead and go to Mike Griffith. Give us some best bets for the week.
Yeah, everybody wants to focus on Carson Beck when they talk about Miami and, what his status, what his relationship status is, and what his, pick apart his post-game quotes. Suddenly he's a bad guy, even though he was 24-3 at Georgia and seemed like a pretty stand-up guy in terms of staying out of trouble, not making those kind of wrong headlines. But I'll tell you what is trouble. And that is the Miami defense. And they're going to cause a lot of trouble for North Carolina State in Miami Gardens this week. It's a big line. It's 17.5, but Miami has something to prove. They're ranked behind Notre Dame. Both are 2-loss teams. Miami beat them head-to-head. But the College Football Playoff Committee has their agenda. And the Miami Hurricanes now have a rallying point. They will bury North Carolina State, win that game. One other game. And, on the surface, you would think Georgia Tech going to Boston College as a 16.5-point favorite. Georgia Tech, obviously a very good team, a very good offense. Boston College with a ton of struggles. Georgia Tech is better than 16.5 points over Boston College. But they're all about beating Georgia, and they're going to pull some guys early. And that's why this is going to be a sneaky cover by Boston College at home to save some face. 16.5 is one of those numbers you look at and say, So I'm going to take Boston College in 16.5, even though I believe Georgia Tech may lead this game by as many as 4 touchdowns at some point.
Yeah, so Mike keeping it in the ACC for both of his picks. I do agree with the College Football Playoff Committee. They have a clear agenda, gave Miami a lot of hope last night, so we'll see how that fares out. Jeff Sentell, we come to you for your best bets for this weekend.
I'm curious about the Louisville Clemson line this week. I found it at 2.5. I think that, anybody that's got the bingo card, I think Vegas is trying to tell us something there with that line. Clemson comes in at a 4-5 team. They have, I believe, a non-conference game, a paycheck game left, and they have South Carolina late. There's the stark reality that Clemson could finish the year 5-7, 6-6, depending on how that border battle goes in the Palmetto State. I just think that one, I think there's some sneaky things going here. I know this was such a crazy game that the system didn't even sniff at it. I'm going to take Clemson to cover this one. I don't know if they win the game outright, but I'm going to take Clemson in this one on a flyer.
All right, Connor, what are you going to do with your best bets for this week?
Yeah, I went 3-0 in my best bets last week. We are looking to do that once again. I'm going to go in the ACC to start as well. I think I've kind of got this North Carolina team figured out. Starting to play well. They've won back-to-back games. They get a Wake Forest team coming off a big upset over Virginia last week. I like North Carolina here, plus 6.5 points. If it gets to 7, I'd like them even more, but I can't find it there yet. So I've got North Carolina at 6.5. And then I've got 2 SEC games that, SEC Brandon, he claims to be. We are not picking this week. First off, Texas A&M, South Carolina. The South Carolina team coming off a bye. They've made changes at the offensive coordinator spot. Texas A&M is a 20.5 point favorite. That is just too many points for me for a game that South Carolina won last year, all about in Columbia. So I've got South Carolina covering the 20.5 points. That's going to be a white knuckler. Hold on to the end, but I think that's a game where South Carolina finds a way to keep it close. Conversely, Florida is on the road this week at Ole Miss. Florida has completely let go of the rope. They did so last week against Kentucky. This game is only at 15.5 points. It is a game I think Florida has to go out, or excuse me, Ole Miss has to go out there and win. I think that there is a revenge factor here for last year for Florida knocking Ole Miss out of the playoffs. I think Lane Kiffin would love nothing more than to run up the score on Florida as Florida tries to entice him to become their next head coach. So I like Ole Miss here minus 15.5. I like South Carolina plus 20.5. And I like North Carolina plus 6.5.
I'm going to do something that I have not done this entire season, and I feel like it's finally time for me to bring this out. I'm going to Conference USA for my best bet this weekend, and I am looking at my alma mater in Kennesaw State. They are a 3.5-point favorite on the road at Jacksonville State, and I think that Kennesaw has a 2% chance to make the college football playoff, which is like a lot more than most of the schools that you would typically expect. This Kennesaw quarterback is unreal. I imagine that he is going to hit the portal and go to a much bigger school because he has been incredible for the team. They've gotten rid of what they call the spread offense, which was basically just a nicer word for the triple option. They've got threats in the passing game. Also, they lead Conference USA in sacks this year, so they've put pressure on quarterbacks. Very balanced Kennesaw State team. This is a program that will travel. The fan base has expanded, so I expect a lot of Kennesaw State fans to make that trip to Jacksonville State. I'm going to take Kennesaw as 3.5-point favorites going on the road and to be able to stay at the top of Conference USA. And so I want to give a shout out to the Kennesaw State Owls and the success that they've had, and I feel confident about them keeping the streak going, continuing the dominance. So that's my only pick for the week. Dari, I feel like you've given us some really good best bets. You're pretty creative with yours. So what are you going to do with your best bets for this week?
Yeah, so last week, nailed 2 out of my 3. Close on going for 3 for 3. It was like a half point or a point away. It was the ECU game, but we hit the over again on that one. Hit the West Virginia against Colorado. I'm going to go back to the ECU game. Memphis is coming at ECU this week. I love the over in this game. It's 59.5. I think ECU is going to be really up for this game. ECU is going to win this game. They probably cover. I'll probably put some on there because that's my team, but it's not one of my best bets this week. But the over is in that game. ECU still has a chance to win that conference and make some noise. So I like them to keep the momentum going. I also like Wisconsin plus 30.5 at Indiana. I like them. I like them on the overall. I'd probably take them on the first half score as well. Give me Wisconsin plus all those points. I think Indiana just kind of got through a big game. They're gonna, they may get up on them, but they're not gonna just like totally pound Wisconsin here. I think he's gonna try to rest some guys to get them healthy. Kind of along the same thought with Mike Griffith and Georgia Tech resting some players. I'm also gonna take Penn State. Okay, I'm gonna take them at minus 6.5 is where I want that number against Michigan State here. Give me the Nittany Lions to get a cover at 6.5.
All right, so that is going to be our best bets for the week. To go back and see our other picks that we made, make sure to check out Go With The Flow on our DawgNation YouTube page. Want to thank everyone for joining us, those watching, and also the insiders and Dari Payro for doing this each and every week. And with that, we will give it back to Brandon Adams. He's going to make his picks live here on the R.S. Andrews Cooldown.
A great job, Kaylee. Appreciate that. I'll give you a couple of picks here real quick on the official board pick that we're all making. I do have USC, just like everybody else, minus 6.5 over Iowa. A couple quick reasons for me on this. First of all, this feels very similar to the game that USC already played in L.A. against what I think of as a pretty good Michigan team. There that day at home, USC handled its business. I think the same thing is true for this one against Iowa. There are a few teams in college football that are pretty good, but they mostly exist just to provide good wins for the teams they play. Missouri's a little bit like that in the SEC. I think Iowa's a little bit like that in the Big Ten. Iowa's role in this is to become a quality win for USC, and I think that both sides will play their role in this pretty well. There is also, and I know more about this now than our panel would have on Wednesday when they made their picks, there's the expectation for a lot of weather here, a good bit of rain, and you might think that would neutralize Jade Maeva, the USC quarterback, but oftentimes what you find out in rainy conditions is you really want the better quarterback because the better quarterback can still move the ball in the air even in the rain. It's really wind that impacts quarterback play more so than rainy conditions, and so maybe against intuition, I think if it is rainy, that probably plays more into the USC side of this. I think this is a USC team that seems to be on the move upward right now. I'll take them minus the points against Iowa on Saturday. I'll also give you two quick best bets. I was 2-1 with my best bets last week. Rare winning week for me this season, just to be honest. But nonetheless, one of mine, the same as one that Connor mentioned, I have it at 13.5. I don't know if there's line movement since Connor made the pick or if I've gotten bad information, but I have it at 13.5. But I do like Ole Miss to cover the number against Florida. As Connor said, this is an Ole Miss team that lost to Florida a year ago. But also, if you have any belief, and I do, that Lane Kiffin is in the mix for the Florida job, you can't play close against the team that you're hoping to be employed by. You've got to demonstrate how good of a coach you are by winning this game by a wide margin. And I think that's what Lane Kiffin's going to do. I also think, given the way they played last week against Kentucky, Florida may have just tapped out. They may have really gone full-on quit mode. This may be an ugly blowout, but I think the Ole Miss side, minus the points, is probably a pretty easy winner. I like the Rebels there. And one of my winning picks last week was going against a little bit of steam with the college football playoff and the selection committee voting. You know, last week we had Memphis not ranked, but touted as the top group of 5 team. We immediately went against it, against Tulane, and Tulane won the game, not just covering the spread, but also winning the game too. We're going to go the same idea here. And this is not necessarily easy money, but it is our pick as South Florida, ranked by the committee this week, going on the road to Navy. Now, this is not your father's Navy team necessarily. They're not very good defensively, but they're 10.5-point underdogs in this spot. This may be a little too much of high altitude for South Florida. In a year in which I don't know that really any team from the group of 6 is outpacing, certainly not lapping the field with anybody else, we may just go against whoever the top group of 6 team is in a given week, because it seems like there's a lot of parity outside the Power 4 conferences right now. So I'll take Navy plus 10.5 against South Florida. I'll take Ole Miss minus 13.5 against Florida. And, of course, our official pick was USC over Iowa. Now, let's take one more trip around the comment section, and we'll wrap it up here for a Friday, and then look forward to seeing you in Athens there tomorrow. Once again, on the DawgNation side of things, we send our prayers to DT. He's got a lot going on right now with his health, been in the hospital. So, DT, we're happy to have you here today. And, of course, our prayers are there for you, as always. There was also some talk about Hunter Yurachek stepping in for Mac Rhodes as the College Football Playoff Selection Committee chairman. Who was it? I think SCM Dog may have mentioned that a moment ago. I really don't think this has much change on the committee overall. I've always been of the belief, the one deeply held, I don't want to call it a conspiracy, but the one thing that is not commonly admitted to that I think is true is that while you have a lot of folks on the selection committee, the only people on the committee, this is my personal belief, the only people that have any real power on the committee are the athletic directors. That you can have former coach or former secretary of state. You can have these, various former players. You can put whoever you want to in the committee, but the decisions are made by the athletic directors. And those decisions are not particular to those athletic directors. There's a blob of bureaucratic administrative power that all generally agrees what the playoff should look like. And whether it's Yurachek or Mac Rhodes or wherever else, I think the body for the most part functions the same. I almost wish sometimes it was a little more bias in favor of your team or whatever. I almost wish there was a little bit more of that actual fan type behavior. But I think deep down, there's probably almost none of that in what is essentially a business operation. And of course, Mac Rhodes had some issues. There was a dust-up involving a player at Baylor, and it sounds like he's taking a leave of absence. So I guess we'll send him. I really don't even know what to say about that necessarily. But he is off the College Football Playoff Selection Committee. And as Savannah Bryan points out, Yurachek had already been on the committee. They also added the Utah AD, which is, I know his team is 13th in the polls right now. That was controversial to some. I really don't make too big of a deal about that. I really don't. All of the ADs essentially function the same way. It could be any of the ADs, and for the most part, they're going to do their thing their way. That's just how that's going to go. But I understand where the questions come from. All right, over here on YouTube one more time. Wildman Slayer, when it comes to Kirby Smart's recruiting philosophy, says you can't take every player, but Kirby takes players that fit his system, and I do think he does a really good job with that. I do. I think you're right about that. Mike Brown says if Gunner stays, I think we lose 2 quarterbacks. I mean, look, it's always possible. Quarterbacks are always in the move. I don't think that you can operate scared when it comes to your quarterbacks. I think you got to just make the decision that's right for you and let the chips fall where they may. I think that's the really only thing you can do. Jerry Dog Fan, thank you for the kind words. I appreciate that. Let me do one more on Facebook, then we'll get ready to go. On Facebook. I lost my comments. Let me see if I can get these back. One more time on Facebook before we go. Patrick Lindsay says, are they bringing Bevo or just the water bottles? Yeah, that's a good question. I don't think Bevo's coming. I don't think Bevo's welcome, especially after the nonsense he tried to pull in the Sugar Bowl a couple of years ago. The water bottles, we'll try to keep them away from them too. All right, what else? So Joseph Kennedy says he's ready for his son to get his first touchdown of the year. Says we missed last game, but we'll be there for the second game. Well, best of luck to that, Joseph. That's awesome. Best of luck there. All right, we're going to go for right now. Good stuff, everybody. Thank you for being here. Y'all check out RS Andrews online at rsandrews.com. Air conditioning, heating, plumbing, electric needs. They show up on time. They do the work that's promised, the price is promised, including plumbing emergencies. Don't let a football weekend be ruined by a water heater that goes out. If you've got an issue today, in many cases, RS Andrews can replace that water heater for you the same day. That's why the RS stands for Rapid Service. So find out more online at rsandrews.com. Enjoy the game tomorrow. We will see you after the game for our DawgNation post-game call-in show from the UGA bookstore. Kaylee will have you pregame there from Jittery Joe's. Great seeing our friends from Jittery Joe's last night, too. That'll be a lot of fun. And then back here on Monday for DawgNation Daily presented by Kroger. We'll look forward to talking to you then, everybody.